those of you joining us, we apologize for our technical delays. We wanted to make sure we had everything working for you, and unfortunately we ran into some hiccups. I'm now turning it over to Kimberly Bell, the Superintendent of Trumansburg Central School District.
Good evening, Trumansburg community. Thank you for joining us for our third community forum. I'm Kimberly Bell, the Superintendent of Schools, and I am joined by part of our administrative team this evening. If each of you would take just a moment to introduce yourself, including your title. We'll start with John King.
Hi everyone, this is John King. I'm the principal of Charles O. Dickerson High School.
Thanks, John. Megan?
Sure. Hi everyone, good evening. Megan Conaway. I am the principal at the middle school.
Jeannie?
Hey there, I'm Jeannie Wiggins. I'm the principal of Trumansburg Elementary.
And Joshua, who's responsible for making this evening happen live with our community.
Hey, good evening. I'm Josh Hunkley. I'm the Director of Innovation and Educational Technology for Trumansburg Central Schools.
Thanks, everyone. I do apologize. We have 3 of our administrators out on vacation this week, so we have a partial administrative team represented tonight. I recognize that time is a precious commodity, and I appreciate that you continue to participate in these important conversations. Tonight, I will provide you with a visual of key pieces of information that have been repeatedly asked from various members of our community. Hoping you can all see my screen. So you may be asking, why is Trumansburg proposing a hybrid model for reopening on September 14th? As many of you are aware, Governor Cuomo and the New York State Department of Health released guidance regarding how schools within the state will reopen for the 2021 school year, and indicated that all schools that are able to must work to safely welcome back as many students as possible to their physical spaces. Per Governor Cuomo's guidance, schools must reopen our buildings for in-person teaching and learning if our region, which is currently the Southern Tier region, which is in phase 4, and if our region's daily infection rate is below 5% over a 14-day average. So based on that, those 2 pieces, we are still moving forward based on this guidance. However, many of you have likely heard that Ithaca City School District may in fact be making a decision this evening to delay in-person instruction, even though we are still below that threshold. It's important for me to remind you that each district poses different challenges based on capacity, and therefore there are variations in reopening plans. At this point, we are still staying the course and taking the position that we can open for in-person instruction on September 14th with safety and health of all of our community members at mind. I'll add to the disclaimer that anything I say this evening is subject to change based on state guidance and, of course, stakeholder feedback. So the overview. We've allowed 3 guiding principles to shape our work thus far: adhering to state level guidelines to ensure health and safety of our scholars, faculty, and staff. That's been a priority. Maximizing instructional opportunities for all of our students, including in-person instruction for our youngest learners that need additional assistance. Hybrid approach for grades 7 through 12, and of course, 100% remote for those families that feel that that's the best option for them. Finally, flexibility. We recognize that we may need to adjust our planning with very little notice, as we did last spring, due to changing conditions associated with COVID-19. For the purpose of this evening, I've framed our conversation into 4 areas: health and safety, instruction, operations, and communication. I'll go into greater depth on each of the bulleted items as we progress throughout this document. As an overview, these are key items that will be in place prior to September 14th. Face coverings, as you've heard many times, will be required of any individual present on our campus and on our buses. We've created additional class sections to allow for 6 feet of social distancing. Daily health screenings will be required and monitored through the use of a mobile application. More information to follow on that piece. Master schedules have been and are still being tweaked to take into consideration extra time to disinfect high-touch areas between classes and more frequent hand washing opportunities. We're implementing the use of electrostatic sprayers both on the bus and in the classrooms. These are devices that will be used when students are not present to reach the underside and vertical surfaces of high-touch areas. Social distancing measures, you've heard a lot of discussion about that, will be in play both on the bus, with the exception of children that are from the same household. So children from the same household may be seated together. However, all children will be required to have a face covering. We're working with the Department of Health, medical directors, Cuga Medical Center, and of course, our school nurses, to finalize protocol and procedures for handling suspected or confirmed cases of COVID-19. Please take note of the FAQ on our website for a greater level of detail on that particular item. Finally, we recognize that some families and our teachers or staff may be more vulnerable or at a higher risk, and as such, we have created opportunities for 100% remote instruction and learning for those individuals. Upon reopening, and for our faculty just prior to reopening and receiving students, all staff, faculty, and students will receive instruction on the proper donning and doffing of face coverings. Faculty will engage students in educational conversations about the personal safety provided by mask wearing. Additionally, all personnel and scholars will participate in learning about appropriate hand washing and respiratory hygiene. Physical distancing will be emphasized by signage and markings on the floors and hallways. Congregate spaces, including bathrooms, will have markings for appropriate social distancing and limitations of occupancy in those areas. Classroom cohorts, or what we're referring to locally as pods, will be limited based on the square footage of each room, allowing for at least 6 feet of space for each occupant. Lastly, our pupil personnel team is working with stakeholders to assess and assist in the psychological and emotional well-being of our scholars, faculty, and staff. We recognize that this new reopening of education looks different. We have been isolated since last spring, and it's very important that we work to address psychological and emotional concerns in conjunction with local mental health services that are available in the community. They're establishing a behavioral or mental health monitoring and assessment for the school community. This screening will serve as a baseline to ensure that appropriate actions are taken to support any of those individuals in crisis. Additionally, they'll provide re-engaging opportunities to help reorient to the new school environment. Something that we've discussed as an administrative team with a lot of input from our faculty and staff is that we would like to offer in the near future a video of sort, a day in the life of a student in our new setting. We will be working in the coming weeks to gather photos and footage so that virtually our families and our students can see exactly what that may look like when they re-enter our buildings. We understand not having access at this time, in part because of our capital project, can be stressful and anxiety producing for our families. So, we've received a great deal of communication on face coverings, so I felt that was worthy of revisiting and providing more explanation. Face coverings, as I've said, will be required for access to our buildings and our buses. If a student does not have a face covering, one will be provided by the driver or at the entrance of the building for those families that are transporting their children. We'll provide opportunities for outside instruction as much as possible, of course, weather permitting, and that opportunity outdoors will allow for greater than 6 feet of social distancing, which will also allow for mask or face covering breaks. In those instances, and at teacher's discretion, a face covering may be removed for a break. We had talked about this previously in the classrooms. The CDC guidance was not completely clear at some of our earlier community forums. And at this point as a district, we were taking the position that face coverings need to be worn at all times. However, with that 6 feet of social distancing, if a teacher feels comfortable and sees that a child is struggling, they may invite that child to take a temporary mask or face covering break. We would not encourage the entire class, even though they are socially distanced, to take a break all at once. Rather, it would be individual student breaks as a teacher feels is necessary for that child. Also, as documented by the CDC, face coverings can and will be removed for eating and drinking or anytime there's strenuous exercise, of course, only when there's social distancing of 6 feet or greater. Additional pre-K through health, public health guidance. As mentioned briefly before, the district will mandate daily health screenings through a mobile application created in conjunction with Hugo Medical Center and the Department of Health. For those with a smartphone, one may use you can use the application that can be added to your smartphone. For those that do not have that device, each of your children will have a district provided student device, and that application could be used on that particular device. More information will be provided at least on or after August 26th on how to access that application and how to use that application. New guidance also requires that the district have a dedicated email or phone line to allow families and personnel to notify the district outside of school hours should an employee or a student have COVID-related symptoms. So that's a new piece, I think, since we've last came out to the public. Again, monitoring and tracing individuals within our school community that may have symptoms. Additionally, each scholar will have their temperature taken once on campus and prior to entering their first classroom of the day. So we have ordered infrared thermometers for each of our classroom teachers. A screening questionnaire will also be implemented for any vendors or any necessary visitors. Again, we have stressed that we will be limiting the number of visitors or external people into our buildings, but there will be times, obviously, that we need to invite folks in for particular task. Those with a temperature of 100 or greater will be denied access to the classroom, at which point our building nurse will take the necessary next steps. So that includes at the classroom door, if it's a teacher taking the infrared temperature of a child, or of course, if it's just an external person trying to enter our buildings, they will be denied access to the building. Of particular importance, and this question has come up a lot, if a child or employee is assumed to present with COVID-19 symptoms, that individual will be isolated in an area separate from the general nurses station. So in each building, we have located a separate isolation area. The child will then be monitored until the time in which that child can be picked up and removed from the school campus. At that time, in coordination with our nurse, our medical director, and Department of Health, the next steps will be initiated, including contact tracing of other individuals that may have had exposure. Oh, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Also, it's important to mention that the Department of Health will determine who should self-quarantine and who will need to be tested. That question has come up repeatedly, and I certainly understand the concern about getting clarification on that item. That piece is actually slightly removed from our hands. Of course, we will support the Department of Health in working with classroom list or occupants in our building. But again, the determination of self-quarantine and who needs to be tested will be driven by the Department of Health. Criteria to return to school includes documentation of evaluation by a healthcare provider, essentially a note clearing a person to return, a negative COVID-19 test, and symptom resolution. If in fact someone has tested COVID positive, release from isolation is required by Department of Health prior to that child or adult returning to our campus. Another question that has come up quite frequently is how will our classrooms be prepared to receive students and keep students and faculty and staff safe? So at this point, we have arrived at a list of supplies that will be available in each classroom. And that includes each classroom teacher will have an infrared thermometer to scan student temperature upon arrival in the morning. They will receive professional development on looking for the signs of COVID and recognizing those in children and making the referral to our school nurse for the next steps if appropriate. Additionally, there will be extra disposable masks for students and faculty should one become soiled during the day or if a child just needs a replacement. There will be disposable gloves for high-touch surface disinfection between student users. And the district is currently researching use of trifold student dividers to allow for closer proximity during group work. I believe in our last community forum, we had talked about those trifolds separating students. Perhaps each student was responsible for their own trifold. We have, as recent as today, received some conflicting information that those may not be sanitary and it may not be the best option. It may actually restrict airflow for students. So we're looking into that a little bit deeper before we have those in every classroom. At best, we may find a different device for dividers to still allow for group work with face coverings, but perhaps not a divider for every student at every grade level. Ventilation is also a very common question, understandable. Typically, this gets a little technical in my response. Typically, the mechanical air filtration systems are designed to provide a minimum of 15 cubic feet per minute of fresh air into any given space based upon the maximum occupancy of that space. So in a classroom that is 750 square feet, and most of ours are larger than that, code requires that maximum occupancy of that space would be 50 persons. We will be nowhere near that occupancy, which would mean that the mechanical ventilation system should provide 15 CFM of fresh air for each of those 50 persons for a total of 750 cubic feet per minute of fresh air whenever the unit is operational. Our units are operational anytime a space is occupied. Most unit ventilators have a range of 750 to 2,000 CFM and are adequate to meet the code requirements for full occupancy. Again, we emphasize that our occupancy will be drastically reduced to take into consideration that 6 feet of social distancing. We anticipate that many of our classrooms will have an occupancy of 14 or fewer, but again, that will be based on the actual square footage of every classroom. Instruction. It's the whole purpose why we're here. The most important piece. So instruction, whether you have chosen 100% remote learning for your scholar or in-person instruction 5 days weekly for pre-K through 6 youngsters or the 7-12 hybrid instructional model, we are ensuring essential learning outcomes. Our instructional staff is working tirelessly this summer to enhance their technology skills. They're better defining essential learning outcomes, and they're preparing new lessons to reach all learners regardless of the venue. So you may recall in some of our previous conversations, we were employing the public to make a choice on whether your child attended in-person instruction or if they chose 100% remote, not on the instruction, but rather on a health and safety choice for your child. And we are still taking that position. Please check our website this Thursday. There you'll find a link for a parent engagement opportunity that will be available August 26th. This is based on some of the feedback that we heard from our families and community members that our families really needed a lot more support for supporting their children, that we're doing remote learning in the spring. And so we have created, with the support of teacher leaders, administrators, and our director of curriculum instruction, a really packed day on August 26th. It'll be a day of learning and sharing of ideas for family engagement, again, led by teacher leaders and administrators. The best part of this is we recognize family schedules are full, and that may or may not be a good day for you. So all sessions will be recorded so that you may have access to them at a convenient time that works within your schedule. So I would encourage you to look back either prior to August 26th or after August 26th to get some of that information to better support your learner. Operations and transportation. So again, I've mentioned this a few times throughout our community forums and touched on it a little bit this evening. There is an expectation that all students will wear a face covering and have their health screening conducted and entered on a mobile application prior to loading the bus. I know that has caused some concern for some family members, and they have said, I'm not so convinced that my neighbor will check the temperature of their children before sending them to the bus stop. And so that's really where it comes into play, that we're making an assumption when a child gets on a bus, we are having that child be socially distant from other children on the bus. They are required to wear a face covering. If by chance a temperature and that screening was not conducted and that child is on the bus, because of those other mitigation procedures, we feel confident that there should not be a spread on the bus. And when they get to the classroom entrance, there will be a teacher there that will then do an infrared scanning of their temperature. That child then, assuming they're healthy, will enter the classroom. So that's our secondary level for any students that may have been missed with that first screening application. Additionally, as stated before, only one student per seat will be allowed on the bus, unless of course their children reside in the same household, and then of course they can be seated together. Additionally, windows will be down on the buses to allow for maximum air exchange unless the temperature dips below 40 degrees. So children need to be dressed appropriately. There will be a lot of airflow on the buses. It could be chilly at times. And then finally, the Department of Transportation does not allow for use of hand sanitizer on the bus, as it is a flammable fluid. So that's just a good reminder. We anticipate that as part of school supplies, children may bring in a small container of hand sanitizer and have at their desk, but they are not allowed to use that on the bus or take that out of their backpack while they're on the bus. Food service. So we are changing our food service. The delivery of that will be slightly different. Meals will be served in the classroom for those attending school in person. Again, keeping in mind that students will be socially distant 6 feet apart. Whenever feasible, students will be able to dine outside, which will give them a greater separation. Of course, children will be removing their face coverings while they're drinking or eating. Meals will also be available to those who are receiving instruction at home or attending in the hybrid model. At this time, we'll be offering meals for pickup, and specific details will be sent out to families closer to September. So our Director of School Lunch, Rosemarie Hansen, is planning a communication piece specifically on school lunch and how to access that if you're requesting for those meals to be picked up at the school district. So you can look for future information closer to September. All meals this year will need to be pre-ordered online. Again, another app that we are looking into, and we'll be pushing that out to families. Once that program is up and available, or that ordering system is available, that information will also be shared from the school lunch program or their website. I know there's a communication that will be sent home to all families. And then the last piece of this is that we will not be taking cash payments for meals this year. So meals need to be paid for in advance, and families can do that through the myschoolbucks.com site, which many families have taken advantage of in the past, or you may send a check in with your child. But again, all meals need to be paid for in advance. In many cases, especially the breakfast, it'll be more of a grab and go situation. And again, students will have that in the classroom. Finally, Ms. Hanson has asked that everyone apply for free and reduced lunch if their income falls within the range on the chart in the parent letter that will be provided again in her communication to all families. And then finally, if you do have any questions, I have included her contact information here. This presentation will be posted on the website later this week for you to reference at a later time. Communication and combating misinformation. I understand that this is a very stressful time for families. There's still a lot of questions that remain unanswered. We are still ironing out a lot of details at the district level. Our teachers are still sorting out a lot of planning in terms of their content and instruction and what those lessons will look like both remotely and in the classroom. But we ask that you reference our website frequently. That is the most up-to-date information, including the date-stamped FAQ. So if you do have questions, I would encourage you to fact check on the website first. And then if the answer does not lie within the information or any of the documents that we've provided, reach out to a building leader or myself for more clarification. I will put in a disclaimer here. We are running behind on some of the communications. As you can imagine, we are receiving volumes and volumes of emails and phone calls, and in some case text messages. And so we're doing our best to field those questions. We have found it more time efficient to put those questions on the website, date stamp it, and use that as a resource to send our families to. That's where you can probably get your quickest answer, but eventually we hope to get back to each and every one of you. And we do appreciate that we are a small community and we have been able to speak with a lot of our stakeholders individually and answer those questions. I'd like to add to that we are really excited to unveil a new application called Thrill Share. You may have heard me speak of this in the not so distant past. And this is a new, yet another app, I feel like I've mentioned that a few times tonight, that will lend to ease of district communication to all stakeholders. So it has been demoed for some of us administrators. It seems very user-friendly. It gives you access to information on all sorts of different social media platforms. So our hope is we can send one message. It will hit you on many different platforms, whichever is your preference, and we'll be able to better keep you up to date on any information that you need to be informed of. We anticipate this application will be available prior to September. With any luck, there will be a training opportunity on August 26th on that piece as well. And finally, together our community has faced the unprecedented challenges of COVID-19. The virus continues to threaten our health, our scholars, education, our economy, and our way of life. New York State Education and the State Department of Health have encouraged communities to work together to create a new learning environment with numerous safeguards in place to allow for the return of our scholars, teachers, and staff to classrooms. We are listening to you. We are taking your feedback. We express our deepest appreciation for the commitment of all stakeholders to educate, feed, and transport and support our 1,000+ scholars. Together, our community has faced so many challenges, and together we feel like we need to make the best decision locally as we move forward. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks. So I will put that back out there again. Today, what I have presented you is where we are today. And this is absolutely subject to change as we move forward, as we watch numbers around the state, around the country, and as other districts, even locally, make new and different decisions. So we will keep you informed. And again, continue to reach out to us because it's important that we meet you where you're at. And if we can help you reduce your level of angst in returning to school, we absolutely want to do that with facts and everything that we have put in place. So now, of course, here's our contact information. Again, reach out to your building principal, check the website, reach out to me. We will do our best to get back to you in a timely fashion. And I believe we have a little time. We do. And so we will go to, I'll work with the admin team now, and we'll move to some of the questions that were presented prior to the live stream this evening. Okay, so admin team, are you there with me? You are. So our first question. Is, I'm going to give this one to Jeannie. And the question is, we received some good information, but we are still confused over the everyday temp checks and questions that must be answered for the okay to go to school. We do not have a smartphone to load an app on, and we are limited income guardians. How would we access this application?
Sure, that's a great question. We do have the Chromebooks with our students, and the students can use these devices to answer the screening questions. So you will be able to use that device to answer them. Also, if you need a thermometer, you would just need to reach out to our school nurses who would be able to supply you with one.
Great, and that can be done by phone call, or if they do have access to email. So any way or means they choose to reach us, we do have extra thermometers that we can provide to the community. Next question is for John and Josh. Will school tools still be used, or will everything be on Brightspace?
So first and foremost, yes, School Tool is still going to be our student management system. So that's where all of our grades, transcript information, and all of the contact information is all in there for the school. So parents can still access the parent portal for School Tool if they had questions about grades or anything like that. The Brightspace system is an overlapping system, and Josh will probably do a much better job of explaining the technical side of it, but that is a learning management system as opposed to a student management system. It will allow teachers to share information with students through a common format and give us a single sign-on system for teachers to share information with parents and students about the academic work that they're working on. And I'll turn it over to Josh to get you a better explanation.
That is correct. So the Brightspace is really a hub, and we're working on integrating a lot of the applications your students are familiar using with their teachers. And think of it as kind of a home base where you'll report to see what assignments are due, see your grades, communicate with your teachers, and from there, go out and follow what those classroom assignments are. Many of your students who might be older and in college might be using something like Chalkboard or Moodle, and they'd be familiar. That's another learning management system. We will be doing a training for parents on Brightspace, though we're doing a lot of work this week on standing it up on our side, and we'll be sharing those tutorials with you as we move forward.
Great, thank you both. Our next question, I'm going to toss over to Megan. It says, hello, I'm wondering if school will recheck temperatures when kids arrive. We touched on that. Last year, my daughter had a classmate that the parents knowingly sent to school with a temperature. I've definitely heard this a lot.
Absolutely, it's definitely a valid concern, and I'll just articulate what Kimberly already mentioned. Our expectation, our process will be once the students go directly to their homeroom or their first class, the teachers will be taking the temperatures as the students are approaching the classroom.
Great, thanks, Megan. Next question, and I'll give this one to John. Why isn't the staff and teachers getting tested before COVID testing before school starts?
This is something that we've spent a lot of time researching and are following the guidance from the health department. Essentially, they are recommending testing for anyone who is symptomatic, but not just a general widespread use of testing. Essentially, it's in part related to resource availability and insurance coverage. All of our teachers who are covered by the district insurance have testing covered and would have access to testing if they were symptomatic. But as long as if you're not symptomatic and if you don't have a reason to suspect that you've been exposed, there's no reason for you to get testing. And that's the guidance from the health department.
Well said. Thank you. I'm hoping you will talk about reopening of athletics. Which sports for which grades? Can you start some sports even if they are not a competitive team? For example, cross country. Cross country is still competitive though. So I'll take this question, and John, you can jump in if I miss something. But at this point, we have received guidance that there will be no athletics starting until September 21st. I anticipate we may see a new announcement just prior to the 21st, but it does not matter which sport at this point. We are not allowed to have organized sports on our campus. I think as a point of clarity, it's important to point out that sports that fall outside of the school district are not part of that. So these are school organized sports that are restricted from starting prior to September 21st. So you may see some adult leagues, you may see some sports practicing at parks. Those are unaffiliated with the school. And while we're talking about that, we as a district have decided that extracurricular activities will also not start until that time, unless, of course, once we reach that point, if there are some extracurricular activities that could meet remotely or with social distancing. But at this time, we've chosen to lump them all together and have a safe start after September 21st. And I believe that decision was made because the emphasis, they wanted school districts to put all their emphasis and energy into the academics first. And once we have that sorted out, to move into those competitive sports. Our next question, how many cases at the school would cause the school to move to remote study? So that's a really interesting question. At this point, I don't have an exact number on it, but I will tell you that we are working closely with the Department of Health and state guidance. So at this point, I believe the Department of Health would be the one to make that decision for us. Next question, will the Regents, AP exams, PSATs, SATs, ACTs, etc. be virtual for remote learning students this year? Or will they only be in person? Will they be optional for remote learning students? John, I'll let you take that one.
So there's a couple of different answers to that. The first answer is that we haven't received a whole lot of information on any of those. As far as the decision to be a virtual student, that would not affect PSATs, SATs, or ACTs, as those are all run through an external system. I know that you can register and take SATs at this time. There are test sites available and students are beginning to sign up for those in September. But as far as the AP exams and the Regents exams, we have really not heard any new information at this time, other than a basic statement of saying that right now we are expected to be preparing students for all of our standards moving forward. So at this moment, I have an expectation that we will likely have Regents exams, but that may evolve certainly as the year progresses.
And John, we have a little bit more time, so I'm going to ask a couple more of these questions. I know that you have been meeting, and Megan, you as well, with both band and chorus instructors. And so our next question is, will singing and band be taught in person? What, if any, additional precautions will be taken for these classes?
So I'll start. I actually met with the music teachers this morning and had a great conversation with them about how we can do band and chorus. The great thing about this is that they are far and away much more expert at this than I am, and are very active in researching what are the best ways to do band and chorus safely. There are separate PPE, personal protective equipment, things that are specific to music, like things that you can cover the end of the instruments with. There are also distancing guidelines. There are just lots of different ways that we can do music, but we really want to keep music as a part of our school, and we want to do that safely. And I'm excited because the teachers are really, really at the front line of figuring out what are the best ways to do that. So I know that they're looking at creating creative ways for kids to do music independently, working separately. We certainly are not looking at having kids in big, large groups singing and playing music. So most of it will be done in small groups or as individuals. And with extended social distancing guidelines, larger distances, and utilizing much larger spaces, because we have a huge auditorium. We have an outdoor space that the kids can go outside and work in. So yeah, I'm just excited because the teachers are being extremely creative and coming up with ways for them to do this safely.
Great, thank you. Megan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've met with the music department. Today was our third time, and they just continue to amaze me with their flexibility and their dedication to the Trumansburg music program. And they have definitely the best interests of the students in mind. So we're looking at options. We don't have an auditorium per se at the middle school. And we're certainly working through many phases of construction. So what we're looking to do is smaller individual lessons for both band and chorus. And we're also looking at how we're going to be meeting the needs that our middle school students that are remote learning, and also the hybrid model as well. So it's certainly going to be a combination of delivery from our music teachers.
Nice, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeannie, this one you may or may not be prepared to answer. How will drop-off work with pre-K and kindergarten students? Can they start outside or enter through the doors closest to their rooms?
Great question. Our counseling team has been spending a lot of time planning out what it will look like in the mornings and in the afternoons, particularly in the beginning when the students are new to the campus, new to school. So we are still working on the details of that, but we are spending a lot of time trying to make sure that the students are as comfortable as possible. Our pre-K and kindergarten students have participated in screening with their family virtually with my staff this week. So we've had a lot of fun getting to meet some of our new students. So we're hoping to continue to meet virtually with students and teachers right up until school starts, so that there's a relationship built, and this will be a familiar face when they get dropped off. So more detail to come. We are working hard on that.
And piggybacking on that, how about dismissal? Do we have ideas what dismissal will look like? This person was concerned because in the past they've gathered in the cafeteria. Parents have.
Yes, so the dismissal is going to look very different. We have some draft plans that we're not completely ready to share yet, but we are looking at using different exits for different grade levels with parents, just like in the morning, pulling up and not leaving their car while a staff member radios in to have the student come out. So we are looking at a very systematic, very organized system that would allow for social distancing and the key of making sure the correct student goes with the correct family.
Great, thank you. We do have, it looks like there are quite a few instructional questions on here, which really makes a lot of sense. I know people are itching to get more details on that. I would anticipate that on Thursday, which is our next scheduled public forum, that will take a slightly deeper dive on the instructional piece and give as much information that we have at that time. Additionally, again, on August 26th, we'll have more information for families in terms of supporting their learners. But also we are working on right now it's at 27 pages of playbook for families, and as well as our faculty and staff, which is just a really deep dive into all of these areas with a greater level of detail. But again, I don't anticipate that that thick document of 27 pages will be ready probably for another week. We are hesitant to put things in writing until we're confident that we can deliver that. So we are continuing to work with our teachers and our staff and our counselors and psychologists and everyone involved at the school level, but also families as they continue to give us feedback. So we want to be very thoughtful with that document. And when we push the final document out, we want to be able to stand on it and say, these are decisions that we've made that will benefit everyone within the community. And we feel very confident that those decisions will remain that way. And that's why we put them in print. So I think for this evening, that concludes our questions and answers. And again, I thank everyone for joining us. I know time is precious and it's summer and summer is coming to an end. So thank you for continuing to support our district and join us in these conversations and exchange of question and answers. And thank you to the admin team and all of our teachers and faculty and staff that have been working so incredibly hard to finalize all these plans as we approach September 14th. Thanks, everyone.